Yeah, so
That,
listen, why I reached out, Miriam, was right, is I suppose I've always really appreciated your kind of honesty and sense of conviction. I mean, I know I said it before, when you were over here, that just the sense of clarity and transparency of your thoughts and how you feel about things, I just think is something that I really admire and often wish that more people had. In terms of, talking about difficult things or talking about how people feel about things. And I think in Ireland, I think we've been very lucky in the sense that Ireland has been, I suppose, so strong as a people in terms of what's happening in Palestine. And that, I would say, comes from our own history and our
yes,
own kind of sense of,
very much so.
yeah.
And
So I realize how kind of surrounded in Ireland I am by people who are okay with kind of standing up in a sense of justice in that regard. And when I've seen you speak, not only since I suppose the last 4 months, but you've spoken in the past in relation to Palestine as well. It's not something I know that you've only spoken about now. But it got me thinking a little bit about um the type of people and the different spaces, whether it's arts spaces or whether it's people who really admire you here, whether it be for your acting or enjoyed your books and stuff. I think people really listen to you, and I think they appreciate the same thing that I appreciate, which is that kind of clarity of thought. And then I was like, I thought it would be nice for us to maybe have a small conversation about two things. One of the things being the importance of speaking up if you have a platform. There's lots of conversation, I think, around the world where people are saying that they're afraid that their livelihoods will be attacked or different things will be attacked if they speak up. And I just don't know how much validity there is in that. And I kind of
well,
wanted
I
to,
think I think there is validity.
yeah,
I mean, I know in the past, for instance, Vanessa Redgrave was definitely affected. People did not invite her to America
well,
because she was against the Vietnam War. But I think in the end, you just have to say what you believe, because otherwise we're in thrall to being muzzled.
mm,
And I won't be muzzled and I won't be bullied. And I think that's something I've tried to keep all my life. I won't be bullied, and I won't have people threaten me. And otherwise, good will never win. If the bad people make us be quiet,
I suppose
those of
that's
us,
the aim, isn't it? It's the aim of oppressive, whether it's regimes or people or government,
absolutely,
is to silence.
that's how they take power. And that's why we have to fight that all the time. And people do it in various ways. They try to do it. They threaten cancellation. And the other thing that's happening, of course, at the moment is on internet with all these social media threats and bots and phony people pretending to be somebody. But you have to be true to what you believe in. You
Mm.
have to speak from your heart. I don't know any other way to be, and I don't want to be any other way.
So do you see it that there's more of a cost to not speaking up than the cost that potentially exists if we stay silent? So it's kind of making the decision to weigh those two things up, both in terms of us being comfortable with ourselves that we've done the right thing when the right thing is required of us, but also in terms of the right thing for people and the world and humanity in general, that cost needs to be what people focus rather than the potential individual cost of, you know, the limelight or cancellation and stuff, that we need to be able to balance those
You
up.
can't be dictated to by other people's opinions and views. You just can't. You daren't. As an artist, you have to remain independent. And as a human being, you have to. Otherwise, you become a slave. And it is extremely serious because it's getting more like that. There are these things called non-disclosure agreements,
Mm.
that when you sign a contract, for example, to make a film, you're not allowed to tell people what you've earned
Mm.
or anything about what happens on set. I strike those clauses out.
Mm.
I won't have it. Nobody's going to tell me to shut up about anything. If I want to speak, I'll speak. And I must take the consequences if I've lied or if I've magnified a situation, then I deserve to be told off and to be exposed. You know, you have to take the responsibility for what you say, but you have to take the responsibility to make sure you say it.
I suppose the impact of social media, do you think, looking back at your time as an artist and an activist, and I suppose someone with a platform in like arts and literature and stuff, do you think since social media has become harder for people to mobilize or easier, or do you think it's just more difficult?
You know, there are pros and cons on both sides of that, because it's become easier for people to communicate with each other, to set up a protest and to disseminate ideas. On the other hand, now the prevalence of phony people and scams, and the fact that people are able to put stuff in papers and in journals and not put their names, their real names to them. That, I think, is a pity. I don't think that anybody should ever be anonymous. I think you should stand up and be counted and put your name to what you say. But it has been proved that many of the comments in newspapers and so on are from, I don't know whether to call them plants, but people that are not who they say they are, and who have an agenda other than the one that they should have, which is to present their own opinions and to comment genuinely on other people's. You know, it seems to me that there has been a diminution of truth. And that's the casualty. You know, they say the first casualty of war is truth. And I think that truth is missing in many of our conversations and our arguments and so on. And that does trouble me. Because if you don't tell the truth, what the fuck are we doing?
Exactly. That's what I think one of the most difficult things at the moment for me is like trying to help or support people to decipher between disinformation or misinformation and what the truth is. And it's very difficult sometimes because some of the misinformation pieces, they're catchy and small and soundbitey, so people can kind of grab onto them as an idea. And do you think that arts and expression, or how do you think we can compete with disinformation and with propaganda as well? Like how can we, I suppose, when we look at governments as well and we look at leaders who often too, also compound some of those mistruths sometimes. So it's like, where can we look to now for the source of truth?
Well, I think we just have to be more rigorous. And education has to be better. I mean, people must be taught how to evaluate an article or a speech, or to be made aware of when they're being manipulated, which is very common. I mean, how is it that 74 million people voted for Trump? The man is a liar, a proven liar. The same with Boris Johnson in our country. He was a liar and he was voted into office. And everybody sort of knew that he was lying, but he wasn't held to account. And we have to be continually morally rigorous about it. I don't think there's any other way. You know, I mean, I get on my high horse. They call me potty-mouthed. And yes, I do swear and say shit and fuck and cunt face and all that sort of thing. But I'm interested in the truth.
Yeah, me too.
That's what matters to me. I don't want to talk sex talk. I am very political. And I
Yeah.
think it's important to be. And what troubles me is when people say, oh, they're all the same as each other, don't pay any attention. They're not all the same as each other. And in that gap, when people say, oh, it doesn't matter, we don't need to vote, that is when fascism takes over. It comes from people's lethargy. And that's terrifying. When people get fed up with it and don't want to engage, that's the danger. That's what we have to fight against.
Yeah, and I think how do we, in terms of truth as well, I think obviously I do think it's an incumbent on all of us to magnify the voices of those who are experiencing genocide or wars or displacement or any of those things. But how do you think, in terms of getting to truth, how do you think we can also make sure that we are not speaking always on behalf of, but how do you think we can potentially bring the voices to the fore of the Palestinian people, say? Because I think for me, a lot of us talk about peace, right? So and the endeavour for peace in the Middle East, which I think is what, most people with a logical kind of justice-led mind want. But then we probably don't talk about liberation so much, and I think peace and liberation are potentially slightly different, because you can have peace without liberation. And I'm wondering, is there something around getting to the truth of that question as well? And maybe we have to elevate the voices who are being kind of kept out or oppressed to be able to understand what liberation means beyond just the peace piece.
I think that's true. And it means an attention to history. The problems of the Middle East have not come out of nothing.
Mm.
There is a history behind that. In fact, the Palestine problem, it's a 70-year history. And the tragic thing is that, yes, the Jews were murdered in their millions, but it wasn't the Palestinians that were doing it. And yet, for some hideous reason, they are now bearing the brunt of the revenge
and
of
just
the Jews.
And thinking of that in terms of, it wasn't, I suppose, the Palestinians that inflicted that on the Jews. And then we look at Germany, kind of tying into the piece of work that myself and my colleagues in the political group here, the civil engagement group, have been working on, the arms embargo piece. So trying to, I suppose, find different ways to interrupt or disrupt what's happening. Because obviously, if everyone does something, all those threads eventually, hopefully, stitch together in terms of being able to stop what's happening. But Germany is the second, the biggest in Europe, and then the second highest after the US, exporting arms to Israel. I'm wondering, like, do you think beyond, alongside the truth piece, there's also the piece where war is profitable? Or what would you think about that?
Oh, well, that is a big problem, because arms make money for people. They are a profitable business, and people like money. And there's a lot of profit and work. People need work, so they work in that industry. I don't know how you make people ashamed, because I think, in a way, that's the most powerful way to stop the arms sale. That people should be embarrassed and realize that they are killing people, that they are a means of killing. And it's shameful. The problem is that nearly every financial institution in the world is investing in arms. And I don't know how you break through that cartel. I just don't know. Because in the end, some people are more interested in their bank balance than they are in rescuing a starving human being. And that's just how it is. And they think that we are irritating protesters, getting in the way of business. And I think we just have to accept we are getting in the way of business, and we must get in the way of business. And that's something they're going to have to accept. That if they want to make money out of killing people, they're going to have to be named and shamed. And I think it's very important to know who are the CEOs of these firms, where they live. I think that's much more telling than throwing oil at a masterpiece. I don't think that is, for me, such a good expression of disgust.
Recently, you've obviously seen in lots of different countries and in the UK and in America and the same here in Ireland, the student encampments and how that has gone. And Trinity College Dublin here initially didn't make any sort of statement on Palestine, but they made a very strong statement on Ukraine. And it's always interesting to watch that when, you know, somebody will deploy neutrality in one case and then not in the other, and the kind of hypocritical kind of thinking in that. But Trinity has now agreed to divest it in terms of its investments in Israel. Do you think the universities have a role as well, obviously, as artists and politicians, being a site of education, I suppose, and in terms of upholding international law? Like, do you think the universities in the UK should follow suit, and the ones in America, in terms of their ties to Israeli goods or arms?
I do. I think that disengagement from investment is a superb way of showing your disapproval of something without killing anybody. And, you know, I want there to be no more loss of life. There's been a terrifying loss of life so quickly. And it shames me. It shames me because it's done by Jews. Now, Israelis and Jews are not always the same. But I went to Israel. I worked on a kibbutz when I was a teenager. I didn't think about it. But now I know I can't ever feel the same about it.
Once you know, you know.
Say again, sorry.
I said, once you know, like once that consciousness is there, you know, yeah.
When you, and that's why education is so vital. And I remember thinking during the war, when the concentration camps were burning thousands of Jews every day, and nobody did anything. Now, what do the Jews feel about that? I mean, they must have been incredulous that the civilized world would stand by. And that was because I think that nobody really likes Jews. Nobody likes Jews. It comes with your mother's milk. The Jews killed Christ, or whatever you want to think about, that they're all rich and bastards. So anti-Semitism is a very real thing, and I have experienced it. But anti-Islam is also a very real thing, and anti-Catholicism. As soon as religion stalks in, you do have a problem. However, that isn't, I don't think, the problem in America. The problem in America is ignorance coupled with, people being groomed, people being manipulated, consciously manipulated for political gain. And I do think that we have to teach people in schools how to be aware when they're being manipulated in an article or in a speech.
So potentially true. I always think about how we would do that. And obviously religion is a subject in the curriculum in Ireland. And I always think that should be replaced with philosophy, in terms of critical thinking or ethical ethics and morality, and and you can still study theology, obviously, and you can still study religions within a philosophical framework. Do you think that that's a way that we could potentially begin to address the lack of ability to critically engage with information?
Yes, I do. I mean, I think God is a nuisance. He's a damn nuisance. And I don't know how you deal with God. Because the people who believe in him, for me, in my convinced atheism, I think they're complete loonies. I think it's pathetic that they believe in it. But they do. And they think that we who try to minimize God are utterly evil and satanic. So already you've got a terrible dichotomy of views. But in the end, we all have to just live together. We have to get along. And I know that if people know each other, it's easier. One of the problems about Israel and the Palestinians, that the Palestinians only see soldiers. They only see people with helmets and guns. They don't see people in the supermarket. They don't see people in the, going to the lavatory sort of thing, or having a problem with a washing machine. They
normal things.
Normal. And if we can increase normal intercourse, normal social friendliness, I think that's important too. So, whenever I see, I mean, I know this sounds a bit balmy, but whenever I see a woman, a Muslim lady, in the full regalia, whatever I've forgotten what you call it, totally covered up to here, I always say, "Oh, hello," just as if she didn't have any of that stuff. I don't want that to be a barrier between me and my sisters. They're all my sisters. And sometimes they're kind of surprised. And then at other times they're obviously very delighted. If we're human with each other. And that is the problem, that the Israelis have started to think about Palestinians as vermin.
As not human.
Which was exactly how the Germans thought about the Nazis thought about the Jews.
What do you think the role is for the UK, Miriam, in terms of their response? And obviously, going back historically, there's the relationship between the UK and the Palestinian land and Israel. What do you think they've conducted themselves in a way in the last while that is anyway led by the same sense of justice that you have had, or do you think they've completely turned their heads to it?
In my lifetime, I think something's happened to the English. I think they have lost their decency. I did think at one, I think perhaps sentimentally, I think that before the First World War, there was a kind of decency in the English character. That there was a sense of justice and fair play. But I do not think that anymore, and that somehow there's a sense of entitlement among the upper classes, who still exist, of course, because they've been running the country for the last 14 years. I think that the thing that is most shocking about our world today is that we are able to look at a group of people and call them, as it were, the other, and to behave to them with cruelty and viciousness, which shouldn't be. People. Why would people throw their kids into a boat?
Exactly.
And cross on a dangerous water?
They'd any other choice.
Because they can't do anything else. And would it not be a decent thing to welcome them and say, "Come here, and we'll let you, we'll give you shelter, we'll give you food, and you can work, and let's see how it goes." I mean, that's what they're doing in New Zealand. I've just come back from New Zealand. What a lovely country.
I've never been. Yeah.
It's astonishing. And it's partly because, the Maori people there have a real sense of nationhood in themselves, and they won't be bullied either. Have you seen them do the haka?
Yes. At the rugby
Wow.
matches.
Wow.
Yeah, it's powerful.
It
Powerful.
is powerful.
Yeah.
And interestingly, New Zealand government, whether it's to the left or the right, whoever is in power, receives 1,500 people every year and houses them and educates them, teaches them English, very much like the Israelis, I don't know if they still do, used to do with settlers, immigrants.
Okay.
They were put through, Hebrew course and taught things. I don't know if they do that now. But I mean, I loathe the Israelis at the moment. I have no sympathy for them at all. I feel, of course, sympathy for the families whose hostages who have hostages, and naturally they are in bits worrying about their loved ones. But it didn't come out of nothing. It's not as if Hamas suddenly decided that they were going to attack somebody. They've been under attack from the people of Gaza for 70 years. And the thing that really decided it for me years ago was that any Jew born anywhere in the world can go and live in Israel and Palestine, and no Palestinian can return.
Yeah.
And that to me was so clearly unfair that my whole being rose up against it.
Yeah.
And I thought, whatever the cost, I have to say that is wrong.
I know. And I think if we don't stop it, if we don't stop that type of narrative, and if we don't kind of, I suppose, reach a world where the Palestinian people are free to live alongside, obviously, their neighbours, and to be free of, persecution, of genocide, and obviously the repercussions of what's happening now, they're going to reverberate for generations, So I know in stopping what happens now, it's not a final kind of destination in terms of everything that's being done. I mean, the amount of Palestinians who are dead, who are displaced, and I don't even know how you begin to heal that even after peace is obviously found. But obviously it's something we need to strive for and endeavour to. And I think from our conversation, I think it all comes back to kind of just summarise is that that search for truth, that search for humanity, and also that search for a world where we can all live side by side. And, we're all never going to be a homogenous group with the same beliefs or the same skin or the same thoughts or the same religions and all of that. But we should never be trying to oppress or to destruct or remove a whole people off the planet. And I think until we get that, I don't think none of us are safe if the Palestinians are.
Absolutely. I mean, if there's one sort of piece of advice that I would give to politicians working in that field, I would say, don't be extreme. Move back from an extreme position. Just slowly step further away and have a more balanced attitude to the person who is talking to you. Don't assume that they are, bastards. Just step away. And then maybe, the heat, the distorted view will right itself. Because it's becoming more and more extreme.
Yeah, everything's distorted.
It's sharpening rather than lessening. And that is scary. Really.
It's very scary.
Well, I'm I'm heartsick. You know, I wake up every day and I think about Gaza. I think about those, I think it was 14,000 children who have lost limbs.
Mm.
I mean, how can that help Israel? And the very sort of smallest thing to think about. Who does that help? Absolutely no one.
Absolutely no one. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's hard to comprehend, and I think it's really hard to comprehend how anybody can arrive at an alternative position other than a ceasefire and liberation. And I'm really thankful, I suppose, for the conversations that you're having in the spaces that you are. And I think um I think around the world globally, we obviously need to keep using every lever possible. And I think there's times over the last few months where, you're nearly tempted to become despondent. You're nearly tempted to go, oh, what can I do? This is never going to stop. And then I have to remember that if that happens, that's not what the Palestinian people need from us, is to become despondent, or to feel like we energetically don't have the power and to change anything. Do you know what I mean? And I think the more conversations we have, and the pushing legislation on boycotting, on arms embargoes, and yesterday Ireland announced, along with Norway and Spain, that it will be recognizing Palestine as a state. So I do hope that the world rises up and finds its way. And I'm just really thankful for you having the chat with me, Miriam, because I do think your voice is extremely important, and it's always very powerful, and I really do appreciate it.
Well, that's sweet of you to say so. I don't think that my voice is powerful. I just have always thought that if you speak with absolute truth and from the heart, it does get through.
That's
and
what's
I know that the Palestinians that have heard me, because I've been on Al Jazeera, the Qatari-based news channel, and I've spoken everywhere I've spoken. It means, that I get hate mail from my relatives. Yes, I do. But I also get such gratitude from Palestinian people. I mean, I was in the airport in Dubai, I think it was, and the Palestinian family came up to me and said, "Thank you, thank you. You say you give us hope. You give us, you treat us like human. And that for me is a huge reward for saying what I do." And I would go on, I'm going to go on saying it because it's important. It's important that people who think as you and I do speak out. I'm not sure that I would do it in Israel. I'm thinking about going, but I don't want to be murdered.
Yeah, will they let you in? They'll probably have you barred at this stage, Miriam, no?
They might. But you never forget, Rabin was murdered by an Israeli, not by an Arab or a Palestinian. He was married, he was murdered by one of his own people.
Yeah.
And that's how bad it gets.
Yeah. Well, I hope there's lots of many other, and I know there's lots of many other people who've, traveled the world, that have come from Israel, or family have come from Israel. And even though the hate mail come in, I know there's obviously lots of Jewish people with the same mindset as yourself, and they may be quieter, because sometimes the hate mail can feel like it's louder. But I definitely think there's more people who understand the desire for peace and understand what's happening in Palestine than there isn't. I think it's just battling against that power structure.
Well, one wants to, there's a bigger success. It's the success would be that people live in peace. That is the long view of victory. the victory would be a victory for everybody,
Yes,
not a victory for one or the other, a victory for everybody.
exactly. Everyone. Equality benefits us all.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that really is true. I mean, Churchill, who was, God knows, known as a warmonger, but he said, better jaw than more war. And I never forget that. It's a very good saying. Talk, talk and talk and talk, and never stop talking.
On that note, Miriam, I could keep talking to you, but I'm not going to keep you anymore because I know you've lots on, and you've already been very generous with your time. And thank you for the chats, and I'm going to see you very, very soon back in
I'm
our.
thrilled, absolutely thrilled about that.
So I'm really excited.
You must reteach me the
Yeah, look what's on.
Tala.
Yeah, look what's on me up here. So it says, see on me thing, it says your ma,
Your ma.
and then it has 2-pack RIP. So I tried to teach Conan O'Brien slang, and he's just not as good a student as you, Miriam. You were the best. You were the best
And,
Dublin slang student that ever was. There'll be no replacing you.
well, I'm coming back for more.
Yeah, and I'll
So
see
I
you
am.
then. I'll see you then. You get some rest, and I can't wait to see you soon.
Wonderful. Lots
Thank
of
you.
love. Bye,
Love you.
John.
Bye.
Bye, 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 love.